Rev up your engines!
Well, if you want to know what the new infrastructure bill is going to do on car design and safety, anything that has to do with the government and lawyers, of course, is going to be an exercise in absurdity. Here is a section of it called Global Harmonization. Okay, it says, we shall cooperate to the maximum extent practicable with foreign governments, non-governmental stakeholder groups, the motor vehicle industry, and consumer groups with respect to global harmonization of vehicle regulation as a means for improving motor safety. Try to say, what the heck does that mean? Well, is it practicable? Is it harmonious? That is so vague, make your head spin. You know, it's like everything the government does. They spend all this time arguing all our money while they're blah-blahing around, and they come up with this amorphous statement that really doesn't mean anything at all. There's absolutely nothing in that irons on any specific measures or ultimatums, just blah, blah, blah generalizations. Now, of course, they say that all new cars eventually will have to have forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, lane departure, and lane keep assist. But the compliance date is decided later, if ever. The wording of these things are just enough to make you absolutely laugh. Listen to this. In general, if based on the research completed under subsection A, the Secretary determines that one or more rulemakings are necessary to ensure safety in accordance with the Section 30111 of Title 49, the Secretary shall initiate the rulemakings by not later than 2 years after the date of the submission of the report under subsection B. Can anybody believe the nonsense that comes out of these guys' mouths, or in this case, typed words? They're so wrapped up in their own legalese. No wonder they're all lawyers playing their lawyer games. They get in the real world and see what actually happens. Oh, you don't want the government controlling this stuff. They have no idea what they're doing. They don't know anything about machines. And all they are is in the back pocket of the corporations anyway, so then they'll make these amorphous statements that mean nothing, so the corporations say, yeah, we'll do that. We'll be green, 20 years from now, we'll be all green. We'll be 100% electric. And, our cars will run on Rice Krispies. It's getting absurd. It's really getting absurd. How absurd can it get? I guess only time will tell on that one. Now, here's a warning about complex cars and why maybe people have gone a bit too far. One of your viewers sent this in. Customer came into us and he mentioned his wife got a 2017 Mazda CX-5 hybrid. When she was in the driveway, she put on the electric parking brake, but instead of keeping the car still, the car slammed on the accelerator and made the car crash into the house. All this technology put in the car, things are going to mess up. All the electronics in the car pretty much go through the computer, a bunch of computer modules. They're all interconnected. She puts on her parking brake, which is an electronic switch, right? And instead, it made the car accelerate. Obviously, there was a fault somewhere, right? Well, when they make these cars this complex, believe me, anytime I see a problem like that in my own business, sometimes you can't replicate it. I'll say, well, I'll believe you. Why would you make it up to me that this happened? But I'll say, I'm sorry, I can't replicate it. If I could replicate it, yeah, then I'd have it on my screen, on my fancy scan tool, my big think tool, scan tool, and if it did happen, it would be recorded, and I would have it recorded, and I would save that recording, and then I could show people, look, the emergency brake was pulled on, and the car took off. And they couldn't argue it because all the data would be in the computer. But unfortunately, if they only happen once in a while, you're not going to be able to access this stuff. You got to have a scan tool hooked up to it when it happens. But if you ever have something like this happen, find a guy like me, have him hook up his machine, give it to him for a couple of days, let him drive it around, and hope that it's replicated. Because if it is, then that data is in the computer, and they can't argue and say, oh, that never happened. It would prove that it happened because the computer records everything, and it would show that that switch was turned on, and then the car took off. It's gone that far, but, at least there's equipment, guys like me that'll do that stuff and say, hey, look, they're not making it up. Here's what happened. But you got to have the data. Just realize that. They're making them that complex. That's what's going to be happening as the future goes on. All this stuff, when it starts screwing up, it's going to be a real rat's nest to figure out what's wrong, or even, was it real, or did she really step on the gas instead? But it's getting that complex. This is stuff you're going to have to deal with. Just, find a good mechanic like me that has that kind of equipment. Say, here it is, keep it for a few days, record the data. When it acts up, then they just save the data, and no one can argue it because the data's there. Rev Up Your Engine says, what do you think about that new Apple iCar and its patents? I hope they put them out. Apple is a company built on hype, expensive stuff that breaks, doesn't last all that long. They come out with a car I suppose it'll be the Apple fools that all worship Apple, come out and buy the things, but I can imagine the mess they'd have. A software company building cars, yes, just the thing, you know. That's almost as bad as GM trying to say they're going to become a software company and make all their money on software subscriptions as they make cars. They can't make cars. They sure as heck aren't going to be that good in software either. You know? I just find it hilarious. These people have something that they do, and then they just keep building it up so that it covers everything really poorly. And then they just expand it, and try to make everything. And then, of course, it's not that good because it has problems all the time. But they have an insane marketing department to sell that stuff to people. And I suppose people wouldn't go out just to say that they have an Apple iCar, you know? I hope they put them out. I can laugh. And I dare them, if they make one, to send me one to try out. Of course, a lot of this is just to get money invested in. Everybody's jumping in this electric car business nonsense. It's like the Wild West all over again, or the gold rush, where they're all rushing to get gold and almost everybody goes bankrupt except a few people in the top that make money. And the people that make money aren't the people looking for the gold. They're the people that are selling stuff to people. So, I mean, Apple certainly could make money at it, but the people buying the cars would be stuck with crappy cars that would fall apart. Just like all their equipment falls apart and doesn't last all that long and is overpriced and is almost obsolete the moment it's out, because then they come up with another one. But I hope they come out with their iCar. I would laugh my butt trying one out. Happy Auto says, Scotty, what's your opinion on a 99 Ford Taurus? It's a project car. I found one for $1,200 with 121,000 miles. Do you think it's a good deal? Very good engine, but very complex. And when they broke, they cost a fortune to fix. You couldn't get parts for them. It was a real rat's nest. A 99 Taurus really isn't a collector's item. Isn't worth anything. Road tested. Put on a scan tool. If it runs good, shifts good, the engine doesn't overheat, it's not burning oil, you could have fun with it as a toy. Don't put too much money into it. But if either the engine or the transmission isn't working, don't waste your time. You're going to put 10 times what the car's worth in fixing it to get it go down the road. Because it's never going to be a collector's item. It's never going to be worth anything. But with only 121,000 miles for $1,200, if it runs and shifts good, it could be an okay toy and you can play around. Just don't buy a car like that and think, I'm going to fix it up, it's going to be worth money, or I'm going to drive it every day 20,000 miles a year. You're not going to get much out of it before something finally breaks. It's too old, and it's got too complex of an engine tranny system to even try to do like 20,000 miles a year on that old thing. Well, here's something you probably never heard of, but in 1966, Chevrolet actually made an electric Corvair. They never sold it to anybody, but they made some. It was called the 1966 Chevrolet Electrovair. Now, it was an interesting idea, like many of GM's cars, especially the electric ones. It was a dismal failure. But what happened was, if you remember, Ralph Nader wrote the book Unsafe at Any Speed about how the Corvairs would flip over, even if the tire pressure was a little bit off. They were horribly designed cars, right? They had a whole bunch of them lying around after that book. No one would buy them, so they converted some to electric cars. Now, it was the lightest car they had at the time at 2,500 pounds, so they decided to take the motor out and put an electric motor in. Since it was a rear-engine car, they could just put the electric induction motor on the back and put the battery pack in the front, in the trunk. So instead of having a 2.7-liter six-cylinder boxer engine like in the Porsche 911, they put a 115 horsepower motor in the back, an electric motor. Realized the stock 1966 Corvair only put out 95 horsepower, so, put out more horsepower at least, but it had no range because it had a 532-volt silver oxide battery pack, which weighed 1,000 pounds, making it as heavy as a full-sized Impala, which was a big car. They said it went 0 to 60 in 16 seconds, which is pretty slow today when you think about it. Being electric, it only could go 80 miles an hour. That was a top speed. And not only were those silver oxide batteries heavy, but you could only recharge them 100 times and then they weren't any good. So every 4,000 to 8,000 miles, you had to change the battery. Not a smart idea, right? And its range, if you're going fast, was only 40 miles. So, yet another GM failure. I suppose if somebody could get their hands on it, that would be a collector's item, right? Used it as a show-off car. They never produced them. They just built some. They made no mass production of the thing. But they had all those Corvairs lying around. They had to do something with them. Nobody was buying a stupid thing, so they thought they'd electrify them. And they made something that had a short range with an expensive battery that you could only recharge 100 times. So not that smart of an idea, but there was an Electrovair in 1966. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.